The leather strap struck her shoulder so hard that it split her skin open. Evelyn didn't scream. She'd learned long ago that crying only made him angrier. The sound of the whip cracking through the barn was sharp enough to startle the horses, and the air filled with the smell of dust, sweat, and blood. Her breath came out in short bursts as she stumbled backward, her hand instinctively reaching for the wall behind her. "You'll pay for what you did to her," Thomas Hargrove bellowed, his voice echoing through the barn rafters like thunder rolling across a canyon. "You killed your own mother the day you were born." His words were the same ones he'd spat for nearly 30 years, but tonight they cut deeper than ever. He'd been drinking since morning, his eyes glassy, his hand unsteady as he raised the strap again. Evelyn clenched her jaw and waited for it. The second strike came harder. A tear of blood rolled down her arm, mingling with the dust on her skin. The pain seared, but she didn't move, didn't speak. Her silence infuriated him even more. "You look just like her," he hissed through his teeth. "That same cursed face. God took the wrong one that night." Evelyn's knees gave out beneath her. She fell to the packed dirt floor, her palms scraping against rough straw. She stared at the ground, her chest rising and falling like she'd run a mile, but still she refused to look at him. The barn lantern swung overhead, casting moving shadows across the walls like ghosts circling them both. Her father's breathing was heavy, ragged. The smell of whiskey clung to him like a second skin. He stood over her, chest heaving, the strap dangling loosely in his hand. "You should have been the one in the ground," he said quietly this time. Almost a whisper, almost to himself. Evelyn finally looked up, her voice low but steady. "Then why didn't you bury me?" The words froze him. The strap fell from his hand. His eyes, bloodshot, empty, flickered with something she hadn't seen in years. Regret, maybe. Or fear. He turned away sharply, grabbed his half-empty bottle from the hay bale, and staggered toward the house. The door slammed behind him. Evelyn sat there for a long time, unmoving. Her back throbbed, the wounds pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. She could feel blood trickling beneath her torn shirt, sticking fabric to her skin. Somewhere outside, a coyote howled. The horses shifted nervously in their stalls. She pushed herself up slowly, every muscle trembling. Her breath came out ragged and shallow. She reached for the bucket near the well and poured cold water over her back, biting down hard to keep from crying out. The sting was sharp, cleansing. The dirt on her skin turned to muddy streaks, running down her arms like rust. She pressed her forehead against the wooden post of the barn door and closed her eyes. The night wind slipped through the cracks, brushing her hair across her face. It smelled of sagebrush, smoke, and rain that never came. For a moment, she let herself remember her mother's face, soft, kind, and forever fading from her memory. She had died bringing Evelyn into this world, and her father had never forgiven her for surviving it. Every bruise, every hateful word had been a punishment for a sin she never committed. The desert was silent now. Too silent. Evelyn lifted her head. She thought she'd heard something distant, rhythmic. Not the rustle of wind or the cry of an animal. It was deeper, heavier. Hoofbeats. Her breath caught. She turned toward the open field beyond the barn. The moon hung low, pale and wide, turning the desert into a silver sea. Out beyond the fence line, a lone figure appeared, a man on horseback, riding slow and silent. As he drew closer, the shape of him became clear. Broad shoulders, bare chest glinting in the moonlight, long black hair flowing behind him like a shadow. The markings across his skin caught the light red and white paint in patterns of war. Around his neck hung a string of bone and feathers that moved with each breath of wind. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just watched her. Evelyn froze, her fingers tightening around the edge of the barn door. For a heartbeat, She wondered if she was seeing a spirit, some wandering ghost come to take her away from this cursed life. But his eyes were alive, deep, dark, and full of something that felt like understanding. The horses behind her went still, sensing him. The wind slowed. Even the coyotes held their breath. For a long, wordless moment, Evelyn stood bleeding under the pale desert moon, and the Apache warrior sat astride his black stallion, looking at her like he'd been waiting for this very night. Then, without a sound, he turned his horse toward the ridge and disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the faint echo of hooves and the heavy, unshakable feeling that her life had just changed forever. Evelyn sank to her knees in the dirt once more. And though the pain still burned and her father's words still echoed, for the first time in years, she didn't feel entirely alone. When Evelyn woke, the morning sun was a blade of fire cutting through the cracks in the barn wall. Her back screamed with pain, her body stiff from the beating. Every movement reminded her of what she'd endured and what she'd seen. Had he been real? The warrior on the black stallion, his eyes fixed on her like he saw something more than a broken woman? Maybe it had been the whiskey haze of the night, or her mind trying to give her someone to believe in. But then she saw a dot tracks dot just beyond the barn door, pressed into the soft dust hoof prints, and a single bare human footprint, large and deep, the kind that didn't belong to her father or anyone in town. Evelyn knelt beside them, tracing the edge of the print with her trembling fingers. The air was still, except for the distant caw of a hawk circling above the ridge. She stood slowly, eyes scanning the horizon. The land stretched wide and lonely miles of dry earth, scattered sagebrush, and a faint shimmer of heat already rising. Her father's horse was gone. The bottle, too. That meant he'd gone into town again, leaving her alone. The thought should have comforted her, but it didn't. The silence around the ranch felt heavy-watched somehow. She tried to busy herself feeding the chickens, hauling water, but every sound made her turn her head. When the wind picked up around noon, she saw him again. He was standing near the corral, still, silent, watching. Evelyn froze, a bucket of water in her hands. The sunlight caught on the beads of his necklace and the tribal paint that streaked his chest. He was bare-chested again, though this time his hair was tied back with a strip of leather, and his bow hung across his back. He didn't reach for a weapon, didn't speak, just watched her. "You shouldn't be here," she said finally, her voice carrying across the dry yard. "If my father sees you, he's gone." The warrior's voice was calm, low, carrying the quiet weight of someone who didn't need to raise it. She blinked, startled. "You were here last night." "Yes." "Why?" He stepped forward, each movement deliberate, graceful. When he was close enough that she could see the scars along his arms, he stopped. Then he reached into the small pouch at his belt and pulled out a carved wooden eagle. The craftsmanship was delicate, almost reverent. He held it out in his hand. "For you?" he said. Evelyn stared at it, her throat tight. "Why would you give me something like that?" His dark eyes met hers. "Because last night I heard the cry of a woman who wanted to live." Her heart jolted. "I didn't cry." "Not with your mouth," he said softly. "But the wind carried your pain. It travels far if you listen." Evelyn's hand trembled as she reached out and took the carving. The small figure was smooth and warm from his touch, the wings spread wide as if frozen mid-flight. "What's your name?" she asked. "Koa," he said. "It means strong." She almost smiled. "It suits you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was something deeper, a strange stillness that seemed to belong to another world. Koa glanced toward the barn, where the broken whip still hung from a nail. His jaw tightened slightly. "He did this?" Evelyn followed his gaze. "He's my father," she said quietly. "He's all I have." Koa's eyes softened. "Then you have very little." The words struck her like an arrow to the chest, painful because they were true. She looked away, blinking hard against the tears threatening to fall. "I don't need saving," she said after a moment. "I didn't come to save you," he replied. "I came because your cry found me." The wind shifted then, warm and dry, carrying the scent of smoke. Evelyn turned toward the horizon and saw a thin column of gray rising in the distance, not the ranch, but somewhere beyond the ridge. Koa's gaze followed hers. "Soldiers," he said quietly. "They burn camps again." Something in his voice changed steel beneath the calm. Evelyn wanted to ask more, but he stepped back, already mounting his stallion with practiced ease. Before he rode away, he looked down at her once more. "You should leave this place before the fire finds it." And then he was gone, a streak of dark motion cutting across the bright desert. Disappearing behind the ridge dot, Evelyn stood there for a long time, clutching the little eagle in her palm. The desert wind tugged at her hair, whispering his name like a secret carried through the dust. For the first time in her life, she felt something stirring inside her, a fragile, dangerous thing called hope. That evening, the desert wind changed. It carried the smell of rain that never came, and something else beneath it, the faint, acrid scent of smoke from far away. The sky burned orange, then purple, then sank into deep indigo. The ranch was quiet except for the rustling of dry grass and the low creak of the barn door swaying in the breeze. Evelyn sat near the open doorway, the small carved eagle resting in her palm. She turned it over in her fingers again and again, tracing the smooth wings, the delicate beak. It felt warm, as if it still carried Koa's touch. She'd told herself she wouldn't think about him, about his words. His calm gaze, the way the wind seemed to quiet when he spoke, but her mind betrayed her. He had said, "You should leave this place before the fire finds it." The warning clung to her like smoke she couldn't wash away. By nightfall, her father hadn't returned. Normally, that meant peace. But tonight, peace felt like a storm holding its breath. Evelyn went inside the barn to feed the horses, her lantern casting long, shifting shadows across the walls. The smell of hay and sweat mingled with the sharp memory of leather and blood. When she finished, she climbed the loft ladder and sat near the open window, staring at the stars. Out here, they seemed endless, cold and clear, untouched by the cruelty of men. She didn't hear him at first. Only the whisper of movement, soft, deliberate, like the wind changing direction. Then his voice, "You didn't leave." Evelyn turned, startled. Koa stood by the barn door, his form half lit by moonlight. His chest, painted in faint streaks of white and red, gleamed beneath the soft glow. His long black hair fell loosely over his shoulders, the feathers in his necklace swaying gently with each breath. Her heart jumped, though she tried not to show it. "I told you not to come back," she said quietly. "I don't listen well," he replied, stepping closer. "Your father's trail leads this way again. He's not alone." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "Two men ride with him, soldiers. They drink, they curse, they carry rifles." Evelyn felt a chill creep down her spine. "He wouldn't bring soldiers here." "He did," Koa said. "And they were talking about your land and about cleansing the ridges of savages." Her stomach turned. Her father had traded cattle and silver for whiskey before, but this was something darker. She could hear the faint echo of laughter now, distant but growing closer. "He'll kill you if he sees you here," she whispered. Koa's expression didn't change. "I've faced death before." Evelyn stood, anger flaring through her fear. "Then go. Don't make this worse." He stepped closer still, his eyes steady. "You think you can stop him alone?" Her breath faltered. She wanted to tell him yes, that she'd survived her father's hatred all her life, but something. And Koa's gaze told her he saw through every lie she'd ever told herself. "I'm not afraid of him," she said. Yes, Koa answered softly. You are. But fear does not make you weak. Before she could respond, the sound of horses thundered through the yard. Lantern light flickered through the cracks in the wall, followed by voices, loud, slurred, cruel. Evie, her father bellowed. You hiding out here again? You think you can keep secrets from me? Evelyn's heart raced. Koa moved swiftly, pulling her toward the shadows of the hayloft. Stay quiet, he whispered down below. Thomas stumbled in, a lantern swinging wildly from his hand, 2 soldiers behind him laughing as they kicked at the straw. Place looks like hell, one muttered. Ain't worth the whiskey, he promised. Thomas turned toward the ladder, eyes bloodshot, searching. Where are you, girl? Evelyn pressed herself against the wood, holding her breath. Her back burned where the whip had struck earlier. Koa's hand rested lightly on her arm, steady, grounding her. Then the soldier dropped his lantern. It shattered on the dirt floor, flames licking up the straw like it had been waiting for the spark. Within seconds, the barn came alive with fire. Horses screamed, hooves crashing against the stalls. Smoke rose thick and fast, choking the air. Run! Koa shouted. Evelyn hesitated, coughing, trying to reach the frightened horses. Koa pulled her back just as a beam cracked and fell, bursting into flames between them and the exit. Her father's shouts turned to panic. The soldiers scrambled, knocking into each other, the fire trapping them. Evelyn could barely see through the smoke as Koa wrapped an arm around her waist and leapt from the loft. Landing hard in the dirt outside, the fire roared behind them, consuming everything, her father's voice, her childhood. The only home she'd ever known. As the flames climbed toward the sky. Koa turned, his face streaked with soot and moonlight. The fire found you, he said quietly. Evelyn fell to her knees, tears mixing with ash. He's still inside, she cried. Koa met her gaze, fierce, unflinching, then ran back into the inferno. And for the first time, Evelyn prayed, not for forgiveness, but for him. When Evelyn opened her eyes, she thought she was dead. The air smelled of smoke and earth, and her body ached in places she didn't know could hurt. A soft wind moved across her cheek, carrying with it the faint scent of sagebrush and burnt timber. She blinked hard, once, twice, and the world came into focus. The barn was gone. All that remained was a blackened frame, collapsed in on itself like a dying creature. The morning sun cast a red glow over the ashes, painting everything in shades of ruin. Horses were gone, the corral splintered. The only sound was the lonely creak of the windmill, turning slow and sad. Evelyn pushed herself up from the ground, wincing as her shoulder throbbed. Her skirt was singed at the hem, her palms blistered. And yet she was alive. Somehow, through that inferno, she was still breathing. She turned her head, and that's when she saw him. Koa stood a few paces away, near the well, pouring water over his forearm. His body gleamed in the new sunlight, muscular, marked with streaks of soot and faint tribal paint. Long black hair hung damp against his neck. Around his throat rested his bone and feather necklace, and on his left wrist, the faint line of a burn where he must have carried her father through the fire. For a long moment, Evelyn just stared. The memories came in flashes, the barn burning, her father screaming, the roof collapsing, and Koa bursting through the flames like something carved from courage and smoke. She whispered, her voice trembling, "You saved us." Koa turned his head slightly, eyes dark as river stone. "You would have done the same." His voice was calm, deep, touched by an accent that gave each word weight. Evelyn's gaze drifted toward the remains of her home. "My father?" Koa nodded toward a small patch of ground shaded by a mesquite tree. There lay her father, wrapped in a wool blanket, breathing shallowly but alive. The guilt that had always lived in her chest tightened. "He's still here?" He lives, Koa said simply. The fire took his anger. For now. Evelyn didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She knelt beside her father and brushed soot from his forehead. He was still the whiskey gone, his rage burned out. For the first time, she saw him not as the man who beat her, but as something broken, haunted. When she turned back, Koa was gone from sight. She rose quickly, searching, and found him near the barn ruins, crouched low. He was sifting through the ashes with his bare hands, unbothered by the heat. "What are you looking for?" she asked, stepping closer. He lifted something small, blackened by fire, a carved eagle, the one he'd shown her the day before. He blew the ash away and looked at her. Even fire does not destroy what is true. Their eyes met, and Evelyn felt something shift deep within her. For so long, she had lived with pain as her only constant, pain from her father, pain from her mother's death, pain from herself. But this man, this quiet, fierce stranger, carried a calm that wrapped around her like protection. When he finally spoke again, his words were like the low hum of the earth. "You cannot stay here. Others will come. Smoke travels far. Others? Men who hunt my people. Men who drink like your father." He glanced toward the horizon, where a line of smoke rose faintly. "They will come to see who survived." Evelyn's pulse quickened. "Then where do I go?" Koa's eyes softened. "There is a river, north. You follow the stones until they shine like silver. I will show you the path." She hesitated, looking down at her father. "I can't leave him." "You can," Koa said quietly. "Sometimes we must walk away to find what we lost." His words pierced something inside her. She wanted to argue, to shout that she couldn't abandon the man who'd raised her, even if he destroyed her. But when she looked at the burnt remains of her home, she knew Koa was right. The fire hadn't just taken wood and hay, it had taken her past. Evelyn exhaled slowly, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Then show me." Koa nodded once, stood tall, and extended his hand. She hesitated only a second before taking it. His palm was rough, warm, alive. Together they walked toward the horizon where the desert met the morning, leaving behind the ashes that had once been her world. And for the first time in years, Evelyn didn't look back. The desert stretched before them, endless and golden under the late morning sun. Dust swirled in tiny eddies around their feet, and the wind carried a faint tang of sage and distant rain. Evelyn's legs ached, her muscles stiff from the long trek over broken ground, but she walked on, guided by Koa's sure steps. "You move well for someone who has spent 30 years under a whip," Koa said quietly. His eyes scanning the horizon, always alert to danger. Evelyn's lips twitched into a ghost of a smile. 30 years under a whip teaches you more than any school." Her voice was dry from the sun and dust, but she didn't stop. He studied her silently. There was no pity in his gaze, only acknowledgement, like he recognized strength even when it didn't recognize itself. They walked in a rhythm as old as the desert. One step, then another, sand crunching beneath their boots. Koa rode ahead briefly, checking the land for hazards. Jagged rocks, rattlesnakes, signs of predators or men. When he returned, his black stallion carried him gracefully, the muscles beneath his bronze skin shifting like living sculpture. The tribal paint on his chest glimmered faintly in the sun, a streak of white and red that marked him as both warrior and guardian. Evelyn watched him, a strange mixture of fear, admiration, and curiosity knotting in her chest. "Why do you help me?" she asked at last. Koa's gaze didn't falter. "Because the desert chooses who survives. Last night, it chose you. I only followed its will." She frowned. "The desert doesn't choose anyone. People choose." He smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Sometimes, yes. But often, it is the desert that whispers first." They walked for hours, the sun rising high, burning the dust into gold. Evelyn thought of her father, lying injured back at the ashes of the barn, and felt a pang of guilt. Yet, with Koa beside her, she felt something she hadn't in years: safety. Not just physical, but something deeper. A shield around her heart that wasn't made of wood or walls, but of quiet strength. By late afternoon, they reached the edge of a dry wash, the stones smoothed by centuries of water that rarely came. Koa dismounted and stepped forward to inspect the rocks. "The river is near," he said. "Follow me carefully." Evelyn hesitated as she climbed down the slope, her legs trembling. "It's just stones," she muttered, though the wind tugged at her skirts and the river remained invisible behind a line of distant mesquite trees. Koa held out his hand. "I will not let you fall." For a moment, Evelyn's pride wanted to refuse, but she took his hand. His grip was firm, steady muscle and warmth, a lifeline in the desolate desert. Finally, the sound reached them. Water. A faint, gurgling melody hidden beneath the whisper of wind and rustle of dry leaves. The river was narrow, its banks lined with stones and scrub, glinting silver in the late sun. Evelyn fell to her knees at the edge, cupping the water in her hands. It was cool, life-giving, and sweet. She drank greedily, the first real drink of freedom she had tasted in decades. Koa knelt beside her, his dark eyes watching her silently, the muscles in his arms taut even in stillness, his presence both calming and imposing. "You survived the fire," he said softly. "Now you must survive what comes after." Evelyn looked up at him, the first real spark of defiance lighting her face. "I will survive. I have to." Koa's lips curved slightly. "Good. The desert tests you, but you have something most do not, a will that refuses to break." They spent the night near the river, the stars above wide and brilliant, casting their reflection on the slow-moving water. Evelyn dared to ask questions about him, about his life, his tribe, his battles, but Koa answered sparingly, careful. Each word measured like a step across hot stones. By dawn, Evelyn realized something she hadn't felt in 30 years. Hope. Not blind hope, not wishful thinking, but a quiet, steady hope that came from knowing she wasn't completely alone and that the world still held moments of grace. Amid chaos, Koa stood at the riverbank, long black hair glinting in the early light, chest bare. Tribal paint streaked faintly with ash and sweat. "Tomorrow we move north," he said. "There are others who wait, and they will not be patient." Evelyn nodded. "I will be ready." And for the first time, she believed it. The river behind them gleamed silver under the morning sun, but Evelyn hardly noticed. Her mind was focused on the path ahead, a narrow canyon trail flanked by jagged rocks and thorny scrub, the kind of place where danger could hide in every shadow. Koa rode slightly ahead, his stallion moving with silent precision. His long black hair caught the sunlight, tribal paint streaking his chest like war marks, and the bone and feather necklace swayed with each step. His dark eyes scanned every ridge, every shadow. Even in the quiet, the tension in his muscles spoke of a predator's awareness. Evelyn followed on foot, her boots crunching against gravel and sand. She had grown stronger since leaving the ashes of her father's ranch behind, but every nerve screamed with the memory of the fire, of the men who had sought to harm her. The desert was beautiful, but it could also kill without warning. "You've changed," Koa said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, yet heavy, carrying the weight of mountains and storms. She glanced at him, curious. "Changed? You walk taller now. Your shoulders no longer curl inward when the wind blows. You do not flinch at shadows." Evelyn swallowed hard. "I had no choice. Survive or die." Koa nodded, almost imperceptibly. "And yet, survival alone is not enough. Courage chooses to continue, even when the desert whispers otherwise." She kept walking, thinking about his words. Courage. The word tasted foreign on her tongue, but warm, like sunlight on chilled skin. Hours passed in near silence, broken only by the occasional caw of a hawk or the hiss of a rattlesnake hidden beneath the scrub. The canyon narrowed, cliffs rising high on either side, shadows pooling in unnatural shapes. Evelyn's heart rate quickened. Something didn't feel right. "Wait," Koa said suddenly, halting his horse and holding up a hand. Evelyn froze. The wind shifted. A faint smell of smoke, not from a fire like the barns, but the acrid scent of gunpowder reached her nose. "They're close," Koa whispered. His voice was soft, deadly calm. 3 men, rifles, looking for trouble. Evelyn's pulse surged. Soldiers? No, raiders, thieves, men who follow greed, not law. Koa's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his bow. "Stay close. Don't speak." Evelyn pressed herself against the canyon wall as Koa slid silently from his horse. He moved with the grace of a panther, muscles coiled, eyes scanning. From her vantage point, she could see 3 figures in the distance, rifling through an abandoned supply cart. Their eyes narrowed as if they sensed something. Her? Koa? Suddenly, one of the men spotted a glint of sunlight on Koa's necklace. "Hey, over there!" he shouted, raising a rifle. Koa reacted instantly, moving faster than her eyes could follow. He drew a short spear from his leather sash, rolling into the shadows as he flung it. The first man fell, clutching his shoulder. The other 2 fired, shots ringing off stone. Evelyn ducked behind a boulder, heart hammering. Koa emerged, muscles taut, spear in hand, and with a single sweep of his arm, disarmed the second man. Dust and gravel flew into the air, glittering in the sunlight. The third man hesitated, then fled, disappearing into the canyon shadows. Evelyn's knees shook as she approached Koa, who now stood tall, calm as ever, his chest rising and falling in rhythm with his stallion's quiet snorts. The first man groaned on the ground, clutching his wound. "You're unharmed?" she asked, voice trembling. "Yes," Koa said. "And so are you, if you stay close." She nodded, still catching her breath. For the first time, she saw not just a protector, but a man who moved like the desert itself, silent, deadly, but full of unseen strength and grace. "Why do you help me?" she asked again, voice low. Koa looked out across the canyon, eyes dark and far-reaching. "Because the desert chooses who survives. And I chose you, Evelyn, not out of pity, but because your heart refuses to break." Evelyn stared at him, words failing her. There was something in his gaze, a promise, a challenge, and a strange comfort. She knew that with him, she could survive not just the desert, but the shadows that stalked every trail dot as the sun climbed higher. They continued along the canyon path. Evelyn's steps were steadier now, her heart lighter. The desert was still harsh, still filled with danger, but with Koa beside her, it felt possible. And for the first time since the fire, she felt like she could face whatever came next. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Evelyn's legs were sore, dust caked to her skin, her shirt damp with sweat, but she walked steadily beside Koa, who rode his black stallion like a shadow of power and patience. The canyon had opened into a wide valley, the river stretching ahead like a silver ribbon through the arid land. Evelyn felt her chest tighten, not from exhaustion, but anticipation. The fire that had stolen her past, the men who had hunted her, the fear that had always weighed her down tonight. She would face it all. "They're here," Koa murmured, his voice low, eyes scanning the distant ridges. 3 figures moved like vultures toward the river, her father and 2 of the soldiers who had followed them from the canyon. One carried a rifle, the other a rope, the last dragging a wagon loaded with stolen supplies. Evelyn froze. Memories of whippings, screams, and smoke surged within her, but this time they didn't paralyze her. She straightened her back and took a deep breath. For the first time, she felt something she had never known before, courage born from pain, tempered by survival. "Stay behind me," Koa said, dismounting, muscles gleaming under the waning sun. His long black hair fell over his shoulders, tribal paint streaking his chest in patterns that seemed to ripple with the desert wind. Bone and feather jewelry caught the light as he moved. Every motion fluid, calculated, deadly. Evelyn did as he said, gripping a stout walking stick she had found near the riverbank, her heart pounding with fear and determination. She would not run. Not tonight. Her father's eyes found her first. "Evelyn," he bellowed, stumbling forward, anger and drunkenness colliding in a terrifying display. "You'll answer for what you've done." Koa stepped forward, positioning himself between her and the approaching men. "Step back," he commanded, voice steady, unyielding. The soldiers laughed, but the tone of his words made the desert itself seem to hold its breath. Evelyn felt her pulse steady. She raised her stick and met her father's gaze. "I will not live in fear anymore," she said, her voice clear, strong. "Not from you. Not from anyone." The three men hesitated. Even her father, drunk and angry, faltered for a fraction of a second. Koa's eyes gleamed. With a swift motion, he drew a short spear from his sash, moving like a shadow across the riverbank. The soldiers shifted nervously, realizing that this was not a man to be trifled with. "You will leave," Koa said, his voice carrying the weight of desert storms and mountains. "Or you will not leave at all." Evelyn's father sputtered, fists shaking. Something in Koa's unwavering stance, his calm, his strength, his presence broke the cycle that had bound Evelyn to fear for 30 years. Slowly, her father's shoulders slumped. The soldiers, seeing the futility, dropped their weapons and backed away. "Go," Koa commanded. The men did not need to be told twice. They fled into the shadows of the valley, leaving behind the wagon, the rope, the anger, and the lies. For a moment, the world was still. The river rippled quietly. The desert wind whispered through the mesquite, and Evelyn felt something she had never allowed herself to feel, peace. Koa turned toward her, eyes softening. "You have survived the fire, the desert, and the shadows that follow men like your father. You are stronger than you know." Evelyn looked at him, tears of relief and triumph glinting in her eyes. "I thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For saving me, for believing in me when no one else did." Koa stepped closer. "I did not save you," he said quietly. "You saved yourself. I only walked beside you." Evelyn reached out, touching his forearm. His skin was warm, strong. "Then walk with me a little longer," she said. For the first time since her mother died, since the whippings and fear had ruled her life, Evelyn felt free. Free to breathe, to walk, to live, and to choose. She turned her gaze to the horizon where the river glinted silver beneath the setting sun. And she knew that the path ahead, though uncertain, was hers to claim. Koa mounted his stallion, and together they moved north along the river, side by side. The desert stretched wide, but Evelyn no longer felt small or afraid. With each step, the shadows of her past shrank behind her, replaced by strength, hope, and the unspoken bond with the warrior who had entered her life when she needed him most. And as the sky darkened into a deep, infinite purple, Evelyn whispered to herself, "I am alive. I am free."